Welcome back to another episode of We Don't Know What to Watch, the podcast where two guys watch random movies, all thanks to the almighty algorithm on random streaming services because we have too much time on our hands. And with me is someone with too much time on his hands, the incredible, the Iron Man to my Ironmonger, Kyle Mulford. Although you have the beard, so maybe you should be the Ironmonger.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Dun, 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 dun.
What movie are we talking about today, Kyle?
I don't know. Tony Stark.
I don't know, Agent Coulson.
I am Iron Man.
Iron Man.
by Iron Butterfly.
Yes.
It was a little independent feature in 2008.
Mm-hmm.
Ironically, it kind of was. It treated that way, kind of more of an independent film with a bigger budget.
Yeah, because Marvel Studios. Yeah, that was what this Marvel formed Marvel Studios for this one.
Yeah, this has got
Now the
some
release deal with Paramount.
interesting history to it. So I just want to go through what this movie, like some of the things this movie could have been. In 1990, so Marvel formed and acquired, like Marvel Studios formed and acquired this movie in 2006, or acquired the rights to Iron Man.
Mm-hmm.
And between 1990 and 2006, it went through three other studios. So in 1990, Universal bought the rights to Iron Man, and they were going to have Stuart Gordon direct a low budget film of Iron Man,
Interesting.
which I want to see that movie. And then, that didn't happen, obviously. In 1996, 20th Century Fox acquired the rights. Around 97, Nicolas Cage was wanting to play the character.
He is a comic book fan.
Yeah, I mean, he wanted to play Superman too at one point. I still haven't watched that documentary
Mm-hmm.
about his Superman movie that never was. But yeah, he's a huge comic book fan. So and this one I remember around 1998, Tom Cruise wanted to produce and star in this film. So and I think we almost had a Tom Cruise Iron Man.
Mm-hmm.
But then in 1999, Quentin Tarantino was approached to write and direct it, which could have been really interesting.
It'll be a very different film.
That would have been a very different film. But eventually, Fox sold the rights to New Line because they had too many Marvel movies in development at the time, and they couldn't. They were like, we can't do them all.
Mm-hmm.
This would have been the time. I think X-Men came out in 2000, so they were probably working on the Fantastic Four around the time too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Fantastic Four is 2004.
Yes. Okay. So, and they probably had some of that stuff in development there, and like Iron Man, who knows who Iron Man is? They did talk to Joss Whedon about directing it in 2001, and this is all stuff that I just kind of found on the internet. So I don't know how much of this is true. Like I said, the Tom Cruise one, I remember when that happened that he was going to produce and star in this. But then it finally, Marvel created Marvel Studios and was like, okay, let's take this and since they weren't a big, studio outfit, they could kind of do it the way they wanted to do it. And they got Jon Favreau, who had never done a huge movie like this. I mean, he'd done Zathura and Elf, and stuff, and Made. So he'd never done a huge big budget movie. I don't know how much Zathura had in it because that was kind of a little out there, but
I like Zathura.
I never saw that one. So, but then he eventually grabbed Robert Downey Jr. and I was watching some interviews with him, which was interesting because he really feels like he has a true love of playing this character, and you can see that on screen too.
Mm-hmm.
With a star like that, it's you don't usually know how they feel about playing these comic book movies, if it's because they're a fan of it or if it's because it's like a big thing, so like they can get paid a lot for it and blah blah blah. But like he was talking about it and going, I wanted to do this because he's like, I've always wanted to like do one of these superhero movies or whatever, and then he's like talking about like being Iron Man. He's like, and someone was telling him, oh, the character who plays Yinsen in the cave, there was an interview, he goes, yeah, I was telling Robert Downey Jr., forever you're going to be Iron Man and no one can take that away from you. And Robert Downey Jr. is just like, that's cool. So he's like, yeah, I've got a love for movies. That's why I became an actor. It's like I can cry during Chud. I get into these. It's like, but no, he seemed like really cool in interviews and stuff about this, and I think he was the perfect choice for this film.
And he rode it all the way to the bank and back 11 years later.
Yeah, because Favreau talks about how he really fought for Robert Downey Jr. doing this role, and at first the studio didn't want that, but he really pushed for it. And I remember when this news came out, like sometimes there's superhero movies that like people are like, I can't believe they got that actor. That's not going to work. And then
Especially when they're playing Batman.
yeah, and then it ends up working. This one was like Robert Downey Jr. is going to play Tony Stark. I'm like, yeah, he is. Because if you think about it, like, and Favreau's pointed this out, his life really parallels a lot with like, all of his, he's been in jail, he's been in rehab, he's had, alcohol and drug problems, he's been in the public eye with all of this stuff. And, he's had his ups and downs and all, so like the good and the bad of Tony Stark, he's kind of parallels a little bit, he really does have all the qualities of a Tony Stark. But that's just a little bit of this thing getting started. It was distributed by Paramount. It was self-financed by Marvel, and the suits were made by Stan Winston's company.
Nice.
And this was a good year for superhero movies because this and Incredible Hulk and The Dark Knight came out all in 2008.
Ah, yes, The Incredible Hulk, the one that everyone remembers from that year.
I liked that movie.
You saw it?
I did. I own it.
It's more than I can say.
My 8-year-old, soon to be 9-year-old, loves that movie, and I've watched it a couple times with her. So,
Nice.
uh, I like where Mark Ruffalo's taken the character, but I really liked Edward Norton too in that role, and
Mhm.
I think that he fit well in that movie, and I think that it was a good choice to go to Mark Ruffalo for the rest of the Marvel movies. But the movie itself, what's this movie about?
Well, it's about this billionaire tech industrialist weapons manufacturer named Tony Stark, bit of a playboy, and then he gets kidnapped overseas in Afghanistan,
That
and
was
then
a
the bad,
choice they made because the original was Vietnam, and Favreau
yeah,
didn't want to make a period piece, so.
yep. So then he decides to, hey, to get out of this, I'm gonna build a cool suit because I'm gonna be a superhero and fly around and shoot lasers and stuff.
Indeed. I
We've all
like
seen
this.
this movie, you know.
What's that?
We've all seen this movie.
We have. It's still worth a talk just because it's what started. It kicked off the whole thing. And if this failed, we wouldn't have the MCU.
Yeah, if this failed, Disney would still probably be super wealthy
Well, yeah,
because they're
probably.
Disney. But they would be maybe would be slightly less wealthy because Disney bought Marvel in what I think 2009 was when I checked.
Yeah, I don't remember when they did.
That was no, I googled it. It was 2009, so a year later.
Oh, okay.
They
They're like
saw
they're
this.
like
They
that
saw
was a
the
good
money on.
movie. I'm gonna take over.
They saw maybe they saw the writing on the wall. It's like,
uh,
hey,
hey, and you know what? As much as I can't stand Disney as a corporation, I do have to say, for the most part, I have really enjoyed the MCU movies.
hmm
There's only been a
for,
few misfires, and even the misfires are still okay movies.
for better or worse, this is what we have, and this has sort of been the dominant force in Hollywood for the past decade or so.
Yeah, I mean they've had a little more choppy history with Star Wars, but the Marvel universe, I like what they've done with the characters, and I like the some of the freedoms. I know that there's not a lot of freedom with it because they have like the overall story arc of the entire thing, the phases or whatever. But like
Mhm.
the names they've brought in to direct some of these movies and all that stuff. So, but this movie in particular, we get the origins of Tony Stark and Iron Man, and I like this because there is a good through line here of just it's an origin movie that works. We kind of talked about that with Thor, which I think wasn't as good, but it was still a good origin story.
Yeah, this one worked because you could sort of arguably divide this movie into sort of like two halves. First half is sort of when well, really, it's the classic three act structure. First third, Tony gets captured and has to escape. second third, Tony starts building the suit, and then realizes how like what his company has been doing under the table that he doesn't like. Last third, takes responsibility for everything, and then gets to have a cool superhero fight because this is a superhero movie and that's what we do.
Yeah, and you really get to see the playboy Tony Stark at the beginning of this.
Mhm. Is this
Just
like is this the only? I can't remember if there's any other Marvel movies that have a quote unquote sex scene.
yeah, probably since Disney bought it right away, they're not going to put that kind of scene in there because
Well,
that
yeah. Well, not just that, but also like even after like Iron Man 2, he's like with a steady girlfriend now. So instead
yeah.
of he's kind of moving past that playboy lifestyle, that wouldn't even make sense from a story decision. It's like, "Oh, yep, this is he's a playboy and we're going to show you this brief scene," and then they roll over.
But the funny thing is he's already in this movie alone getting past that a little. He's not over it completely because he's still kind of cocky and all this stuff, but like he's
Mhm.
realized that, I like the realization that he has when he gets kidnapped and sees all of his weapons are in the wrong hands. And finally, like he takes the shades off from over his eyes and wakes up to the reality of the world,
Mhm.
whereas like I'm making these for the good guys and I'm making millions off of it. So I'll just sell them and we're all good. And then it's like, oh crap, I'm responsible for the death of a lot of people, like a lot of
Mhm.
innocent people, because my stuff's getting sold to the bad guys too. Yeah, I think the whole transformation of him in this film is what really drives the movie.
Yeah, and I guess without Robert Downey Jr.'s performance, without someone being able to pull that character and sell that transformation while also being able to crack off some one-liners now and then and really sell that, from beginning to end, sell that character arc, it wouldn't work.
And he keeps the cockiness too throughout the entire series, but he's like that. He turns into that really likable cocky guy, like that
Mhm.
just like full of himself, but like he's still likable, even though he's kind of an asshole.
Yes,
and
because
and
even when he is cocky, he somehow pulls it off anyway.
yeah, and I don't know if anybody could do that like Robert Downey Jr. can.
Hmm.
um, the one thing we mentioned the sex scene earlier with Leslie Bibb.
Nice.
And it was a scene that I don't like and doesn't hold up for me because I believe his part of it, but I was also like, okay, so you took a pretty female reporter and you reduced her to someone who will like go, oh, screw the story. I'll just have sex with him because he's a rich, pretty millionaire. Like it ruins the integrity of a female reporter and just kind of
Fair
like
enough.
throws it out the window.
It is a weirdly throwaway scene.
Yeah, and I didn't like the way they wrote that in there. Like, the fact that it was a professional that like did that. You could portray him as a playboy in a different way. I
Hmm.
think, but I mean, it worked for the story and all that stuff. But I like the little touches that end up. Watching this retroactively, you can't really talk about it without talking about the rest of the series, because you have, this is where the very beginning of all of this, where you get the little first arc reactor from his chest and the proof that Tony Stark has a heart.
I really like that. Has a good setup and payoff there.
Yeah. And Gwyneth Paltrow as Pepper Potts is great.
Hmm.
I really like her in this role. Of course, Jeff Bridges as Obadiah Stane is good.
Yeah, I wish he played more bad guys.
Yeah, he has a lot of fun with it.
Yeah, he's very charismatic. He really does feel like this very intelligent businessman. He's almost got like a Steve Jobs, like Jeff. I mean, this is not quite the same as Jeff Bezos that Jeff Bezos is now. But
Yeah.
yeah, definitely like for that tech billionaire who is probably not the most ethical person in the world.
Yeah, yeah. And he got into the character too because it's like watching some interview with him, he was joking about, yeah, I've always wanted to shave my head before and just never did it. And then and so he goes, and I'm looking at the character and like looking in the comics and going, oh, this character I'm playing has a shaved head. And he's like, I'm gonna go ask Favreau if I should shave my head. And he goes, I went up and asked him, he goes, yeah, you can if you want. He's like, I was hoping for him to say, "Yeah, you have to do it." But he goes, "So we kind of gradually like just knocked it down a little bit at a time, and then finally it was just like, well, we're shaving it all off, and it's like it worked. so
Nice.
so I love that he's also one that's he's always been one of those actors that like will just have fun with the role. So like you got a
Yeah.
lot of that with that, and Paul Bettany as Jarvis is fun too.
Yeah, because I know for a long time in the comics, Jarvis was just like an actual butler.
Yeah, yeah. So I like that update, and there. There are certain changes, but the thing is I think they brought in a lot of actual comic artists and comic writers from
Hmm.
Marvel. They used to keep like with Marvel movies, they were always separated from the actual Marvel publications, but this one they brought in about a bunch of writers and artists to go, okay, keep us on track with that's veering too far away from character, or this is going or maybe we should go here with this character, or
Hmm.
all that stuff. So and I think that helped keep the character true to the comics with the changes making sense.
Yeah, while still being able to adapt it to another medium.
Yeah, and I like their approach of doing Ironmonger and having that story go, because I agree they didn't want to do the Mandarin because it was too fantastical to put in there. They do mention the Ten Rings.
Hmm.
The bad guys are part of the Ten Rings, whatever. So there's little hints of it in there, but I'm glad they didn't go with the Mandarin in the first film.
Hmm. Plus, pretty very hard to tiptoe around sort of a racially insensitive background there.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm one of those that likes what they. I love the Mandarin twist in Iron Man 3.
Yeah, that was pretty funny.
All those people that got pissed off about that, I'm like, oh my god! Like, I think it's wonderful. I think it's fantastic. And yeah, what else do we have in here? We've got
I did like how in this superhero fight at the end of the film, it's really less brute force. They emphasize how Tony's able to win because he's able to outthink his opponents more than just, blast them.
yeah, and it's kind of a mix of both too, which is great because Iron Man, he is a flying weapon,
Hmm.
but he's got a genius inside that flying weapon. So and they really they play that stuff too. It all seems believable when he's building that first crude Iron Man. Somehow it seems believable. The arc reactor, it seems believable. Like
Yeah, that was enough for audiences in 2008 versus, a few years later, like in 2014, which is like, here's a talking tree.
yeah,
Here's a raccoon that loves guns.
yes. So um
Here's a blue
yeah,
guy that doesn't understand sarcasm.
it definitely feels more grounded than some of the other stuff, but then they kind of grew into all that. Uh,
Like,
trying to think of we get introduced to Agent Coulson, Clark Gregg in this, and he's just I love he's I'm part of strategic homeland
yeah, blah
intervention.
blah blah.
Yeah, they're
Like
like,
just
you should come up with a shorter name. And then finally at the end, he's like, you just call it Shield.
yeah,
uh, but yeah, he's trying to. What was he trying to actually? He was trying to debrief Iron Man on his captivity
yeah. That was
through the
it.
whole movie, and they just kind of like keep pushing him off until Pepper Potts finds out that Stain is selling things on the backside, and he's the one who pushed Tony Stark out of his own company and all this stuff, and then she's like, I need your help, Coulson. So I like Clark Gregg as Coulson
Hmm.
throughout the next few
Fun
films
in the
there.
movies, and I still enjoyed his when he was able to continue that into Agents of Shield.
Yeah. So that's introducing that character. So there are elements of stuff that's going to carry on throughout the Marvel universe.
And in some cases, Agent Coulson was even then sort of like put in the comics because of the movie.
Yeah. And then you have at the tail end, the end credits scene, you've got the comic book character that was based off of Samuel L. Jackson. So then they got Samuel L. Jackson to play the character that was based off of him.
Yeah, and they just like I don't know how much they paid him to do this because like I'm not sure he was thinking like, yeah, I'm gonna be playing this character for the next 10 years. It's like I'm gonna be like, yeah, I'm just gonna be show off, do this mumbo jumbo, but sell it because I'm an actor and that's what I do.
And I'm sure he does. I'm sure he probably like he's one of those that'll just take roles.
Yeah, he's a working actor in that definition. He'll work, he'll do his job, he'll move on.
Yeah, that's always been one of my favorite quotes from what was it? Michael Caine. There's the infamous quote where someone asks him if he's ever seen Jaws 2, and he goes, "No, but I've seen the
No, he
house it
was in
built."
Jaws 4.
Oh, Jaws 4. And
Yes,
no, but I've seen the house it bought.
exactly.
So,
He's just
uh,
working.
but yeah, I mean, brief cameo by him at the end.
Where do you did you stay till the very end of the credits when you saw it in theaters?
I think I did.
I did not. I missed it.
I can't remember. Honestly, there's been so many of those end credits now. I can't remember if I knew about that ahead of time. If I vaguely remember that I did. I must have found out ahead of time that there was going to be some sort of end credit thing. And then
I
for the longest time, it was like people started staying after the credits for like any comic book movie, even if it wasn't
mhm.
Marvel, just to see if they were going to do something like that. It's like, no, it's just Marvel. I liked when they did fun things like Avengers, the shawarma scene.
Yeah.
And then they started getting into like, oh, I'm just going to give you a scene that could be in the next movie.
Well, then they did some other fun ones too, like Guardians of the Galaxy, especially Guardians of the Galaxy 2 just had some fun, goofy ones.
Yeah, that's true. So I don't know if we've left anything else out. A lot of good one-liners, zingers in here.
22 movies later, it's still going. The one joke that still got me off guard was when he's trying to take off his suit and then Pepper walks in on him. I was like, let's face it, this isn't the worst thing you've got me doing.
Yeah, again, his interactions with Pepper Potts are pretty great.
hmm
Just because like it's that whole she's in love with him, he doesn't, you know he doesn't really acknowledge back, but you can tell like he wouldn't be who he is without her.
hmm
And that kind of plays through the whole series too. It's just like if she wasn't around, he'd be a mess. He wouldn't have a company because he'd be lost and he'd be a mess.
He'd
He's
still
a
be in his garage working on stuff.
Yeah, he's not very organized. He's just a genius.
Yeah, I do kind of like that. So how when he starts, he has sort of that obsessive tendency. Like now that he's built his first Iron Man suit, now I'm going to keep working on it because it kind of becomes his new obsession. Whether doesn't necessarily know what he's going to do with it, but he's always messing with it, always trying to improve it.
Yeah.
Very much.
and and then his and I think he's the likable kind of asshole because he is a good guy. Like Tony Stark is a good guy at heart. Like when he realizes what his weapons are doing, he legitimately wants to change that, and
hmm
he wants to go out and save the world. And that's the whole thing. Like and that's the story arc that continues out through the whole series too. Is it ends up being, he makes mistakes because of how much he wants to protect the world, but and that causes things to go bad, but it all comes from a place of really wanting to protect everyone,
hmm
and he takes the weight of the world on his shoulders, really, the character does. And that's why he kind of is like the through line for the entire Avengers. He's this guy who takes on the responsibility of everything.
hmm
So, and you kind of get an inkling of that character in this movie.
I think that's a good place to, or that's a good final thought. Yeah, definitely. It is fun to go back and rewatch this every once in a while to say that, hey, this does it movies still work now like it worked back then for the most part. I think yes. It's definitely stronger on building up the character that we definitely come to know and love over like 20 some movies.
And I will have to say, also closing, the comedy still works. The All of the actors really play off of each other really well. And 12 years later, the effects are great.
Mhm.
The suits, it's really seamless. That like this is one of those movies that you see so many movies that are full CGI now, and it just looks awful. This
Mhm.
is one of those that proves that if you blend it well and you have practical blended with the CGI, like this movie, you can't tell where one ends and the other begins, and it
Mhm.
really flows seamlessly into each other. And there's enough practical in there to just make you just kind of immersed in it, and the CGI kind of polishes it up so you don't see the seams. and
Yeah, and then of course, still some stuff is like when he's flying above like Super 5 or like shooting out lasers and stuff. It's obviously you can't do that practicals really well. But yeah, it is a good mix, and I think I'm glad that they stick with that for the most part.
yeah. So everything about this movie holds up, and I really like this movie.
Mhm.
It still is one of the best of the 75 movies that have come out in the
However many,
however many, what is it, like 22, 23, 24, something like that.
something like that.
Out of all of them, this very first one is still one of the best, I think. So
Yeah,
it
we
really
almost
holds up. If you haven't watched it a while and you've seen a lot of the newer Marvel movies, go back and watch the origin of Tony Stark.
well, especially this year, which is kind of like the first year since 2009 that we haven't really had any.
Yeah, that's true. So we got a lot of shows coming out on Disney Plus here soon.
Yeah, his announcement was pretty nutty.
Uh, and yeah, we're recording this probably like a week after the Disney Plus announcement of all of its movies and shows for the next, couple of years. And I will say that a part of me is wants to be like, oh, you're oversaturating with this Marvel stuff. But then I watch the trailers and go, that Falcon
Just
and Winter
never
Soldier, the
mind.
Falcon and Winter Soldier, it looks like it has the budget of like a 6 hour movie, not six 1 hour episodes.
Mhm.
It looks amazing. Loki looks amazing. WandaVision looks really unique and interesting. Like I think I'm going to enjoy all of these. Like I it seems like I should be getting Marvel overload and just getting oversaturated, but like I'm still enjoying this stuff.
Oh, come on. One of them, not, there's got to be at least one Iron Fist in there somewhere, right?
Well, but see, you can go. Those were Netflix shows, and they
But
kind
you know
of
what I
kept
mean.
them
The
at a
comics.
distance to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I never watched Iron Fist, but like I liked Daredevil.
Good. So,
Jessica Jones first season was good. Luke Cage was okay. Punisher was great. So I'd like to see him jump over back like into the Marvel universe and like
yeah, I
bring.
mean, I guess John Bernthal's game for it. So,
Yeah, so I'd like to. I want to see. You know how the Marvel comics have the run of Marvel Knights, like so, like the darker.
mm-hmm.
I want to see Disney. I wish that they would do like a section of Disney that parents can like set parental controls and like do harder movies. Like they're gonna do Moon Knight. I want that to be just crazy, insane. I want Punisher to.
Squirrel Girl.
What's that?
I want Squirrel Girl.
I would love to have Squirrel Girl. My daughter would probably love that. She has like a bunch of the graphic novels of Squirrel Girl. So,
It's so much fun.
but I want to see like really dark effed up Punisher. Like they were able to do with Netflix. They were made them darker. But I want to see, since Disney actually has a good track record of the storylines, let them do them, but do them darker and make them bring in those dark characters and keep them dark and keep them troubled.
Because the one thing we need more of is dark and gritty superhero movies. Isn't that right, Zack Snyder?
Yes. See, I mean, if you do it right, they can be real good. If you
Yeah,
do it just for the sake of doing it dark, then you get
I guess
Justice League and Batman v Superman.
I guess for my personal taste, I will generally take light, breezy superhero stuff with heart over dark superhero stuff any day of the week, but that's just me.
I I like I said, I liked the Punisher because it's dark, but it was dealing with something real and tangible and something that needs to be talked about, like with PTSD and all that stuff, and that kind of thing. If you go and tackle real issues instead of being dark just because, hey, Superman's dark, right? No, he's not. You got to choose the right characters too.
Hmm.
So, but anyway, uh, what do you choose for a double feature with this?
Um, I don't know. Another Marvel movie? Pick one.
Yeah, I was just gonna go just because I recently watched it and talked about it on our What You Watching. Um, go from the beginning of Tony Stark to the end, Iron Man and Avengers Endgame,
Hmm.
and just see where like just how that character has evolved over all this time by watching the first and the last. But that's my recommendation.
Yeah, good stuff.
So let's get on to. I'm sure there's a lot of stuff we didn't cover, but people know this movie.
Yeah, I don't feel the need to go into deep conversation about this movie because people have watched it a lot.
All right, we're going to go all genres here for our next movie and spin the wheel. All right, what do we have here? Dirty Harry Callahan returns again, this time saddled with a rookie female partner. Together, they must stop a terrorist group consisting of angry Vietnam veterans. Speaking of dark and gritty,
So it's Dirty Harry versus Rambo.
yes, indeed. Uh, this is a 1976 film called The Enforcer. And this one I've seen the original Dirty Harry, and I think that's the extent of it. I don't think I've seen any of these sequels, so
Neither have I.
but this one is streaming on HBO Max.
Cool.
Oh, that'll be fun. A little
Yep,
Dirty
I
Harry
do like Clint Eastwood.
for sure. That'll be a good one to talk about. Till then, though, you can find us on Twitter at AwesomeKM
And at Noah_Saturn, SATERN.
and on Instagram at We Don't Know What to Watch. And until next time,
Did I fire 5 shots or 6?
I am Iron Man.
Rah.
I do have a heart.
Tony Stark was able to build this in a cave.
If I only had a heart.
Exactly. It's all connected.
All right.